there's mornings I wake up trying to keep myself unbelievably positive and focused on the chore, and there's moments I wake up and I just feel like breaking down in tears and thinking, is everything I've worked for and strived for now gone?
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Optimism is a powerful trait. It can drive one to success. It can clear clouds of self-doubt. It can calm and influence those around you. But a pandemic can impact even the most optimistic person. Shane Delia is the owner of the Delia Group, known for Maha Restaurant and Maha Bar, and more recently, thanks to the pandemic, Providoor. Shane, you're a pretty positive, upbeat, optimistic person. How are you feeling at the moment with all the changes that have just happened again in Victoria?
I continue to stay positive. I mean, I think the only thing that's I'm concerned about are the things that are outside of my control. And if they're outside of your control, well, there's nothing you can do about it. So I try not to focus on them, to be honest. I mean, I'm not a doomsdayer, and I don't think there's a cure, and I don't think we're ever going to be in a position where we're not living with this thing. But we've been living with stuff for a long time, and we always seem to find a way. So I see this as a really great chance to refocus and to unshackle yourself from the things that have been restricting us for years, and maybe reposition our goals and ambitions.
What are some of those things that you said, things that are been restricting you for years, or the industry for years? What are some of those things that you think can be changed now?
I think there's lots of things. I think personally, if you look at the personal parallel first, it's just, maybe it's expectations placed on yourself in regards to what success looks like, what normality looks like, what equality looks like, what, a work week looks like. So, I mean, all those, I suppose, personal, sort of limits or ambitions that we put on ourselves. If you spoke to me 6 months ago, what a success looks like, it would look like paying down the majority of my loans, in the next 18 months, like we were on track to do. It's building that house that I've been working for the last 20 plus years to get to a position where I can build that house. It's sending my kids to the school I wanted to send them to. But what's the motivation behind all those things? Is it greed? Is it keeping up with the Joneses? Is it because you're putting so much expectation on yourself? I mean, and are then those things shackling you into, I suppose, a self-destructive lifestyle that you just get trapped up in. So, I mean, there's all those preservation things that you can look at and start to go, do I actually need this shit? Or is this just pressure I'm putting on myself? Because then that impacts your business decisions, So, I mean, if you look at your business, I mean, I talk about resetting and recalibrating there. And it's things like, it's a time for government to relook at the way we do things. And why do we do it? Have we been so long trying to, justify and appease the needs of the minority when we're forgetting about the majority? Is it a time for reform, for employer reform, where there's because there's been angst there in the last 5 years or so? Is it a chance to go, let's clear the slate, let's fucking silence the noise of the union, let's silence the noise of the government? What do we both want? Because we're the ones suffering, the employee and the employer. How do we find middle ground where we can both prosper? And from a government perspective, it's about reform in regards to legislation, in tax legislation, and really, if they really do want to see the economy prop itself up, enable us to do that. Give us some mechanisms where we can actually be a productive part of society, and we can employ more people, create opportunity, and stimulate the economy.
You've always been a very optimistic person, but the pandemic sort of landed, and you would have had question marks about the uncertainty of the future of your restaurants at some stage. What was that period like for you?
Oh, I mean, it's dark because there's emotional connection. I mean, I'm sitting in the dining room now, and I tried to be one of the most critical people of our own brands, but I think Maha as a dining room is one of the most beautiful dining rooms in the country. It's stunning, and and I'm sitting here now, and I'm seeing it being transformed over the last 15, 16 weeks to a production facility into a dining room again. I mean, we're servicing customers again, and it's beautiful. But I suppose what the period was like, I mean, when we first had the pandemic hit, I mean, it was devastating. I mean, I try to be as strong as I can, but I mean, I'm only human. I'm only a man. I've battled with mental illness my whole life. I've got attention deficiency disorder. I seek help for that, and all those things are magnified when you're under emotional and financial pressure. So, there's mornings I wake up trying to keep myself unbelievably positive and focused on the chore, and there's moments I wake up and I just feel like breaking down in tears and thinking, is everything I've worked for and strived for now gone? But that's an emotional connection. I mean, that's what we were talking about earlier. That's about, why do I actually feel this emotional connection to this? Is it because I am now going to be broken, homeless, and destitute? Well, no, that's not going to happen. But it's the emotional connection with these things that we've worked so hard for that you may lose. But life's about loss. Yeah, everything you have, you lose. It's whether if you want to, focus on the beauty that can come out of that emotion. I mean, I've established some beautiful relationships with people through this hard time, and it's also put a spotlight on people who I thought were pure and genuine, and showed me that maybe they weren't.
How does that make you feel through this time? Has it changed you, this period of time?
No, not really. I mean, has it changed me? No, I'm the same person. I'm just as resilient as I've always been. I'm just as hopeful as I've always been. I'm not going to let doom and gloom and propaganda and bad, I suppose, political decisions inhibit me from being who I am. If anything, it's probably strengthened my resolve and justified, that maybe, some of my positions, whether they've been hard-nosed positions that I've taken in the past, are actually the right decisions. And it's made me trust myself a little bit more, because I think that every time I doubt myself and I try to do something that, this person says maybe I shouldn't, it never works. So I just need to follow my own heart a little bit more, I think, and I think this time's given me a great opportunity to do that.
A little earlier, you sort of said, you've seen the dining room, shift to a production facility and back to a dining room. Can you take us through that sort of production model that you created, and also the launch of Providoor, which includes many amazing restaurants in Melbourne as well?
Yeah, I mean, but we closed Maha and all of our restaurants before anybody else did in Victoria. So I work very closely with the Grand Prix Corporation, and I was there the morning of the cancellation of the race. Wow. And I quickly got out of the track because they were about to lock it down, and I went back to our head office and said, okay, shit's about to get real. This is no longer something that's happening in China that we're talking about over here. This is now an Australian problem, and I have to make some decisions based on what's in the best interest of my staff and my family and my businesses before the government just do what they think's necessary. So we came back. I looked at our finances with our accounts team and worked out. I kind of thought in my gut that government are going to probably shut this thing down for about 3 to 4 weeks, and they probably should have just gone crunch straight away and shut the country down, and really enforced a really iron grip lockdown. But they didn't. They piss-farted around, and then things start to get out of control, and then you have bad governance, where we're led to today. But I thought, okay, well, I can't wait for them, so I'm going to do it. So we did it, and we thought we could probably withhold, weather the storm for about 5 to 8 weeks. And in that time, the government then decided to shut it down. So it sort of took the pressure off me. But from 5 to 6 weeks, it looked like we were going to be closed for a lot longer, which we have been. And I said, well, we need to find some revenue. Maha's got a pretty good following and a good database. I mean, we've got 190 plus thousand people in our database.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's pretty strong. I mean, it's good because people we connect with them, and we run a traditional business, not in a traditional business mentality. I mean, a lot of restaurateurs, they know who their customers are, as in they know Johnny's wife is Lucy's kids' names are Jack and Fred, and he works for this person, and they come into the restaurant and they eat on they love a bottle of Bolly, and they know those details, but they haven't got a bloody clue about their email address, or where else they dine, where they live, or what they do for a job. So we are interested in both sides. So we've grown that over the last 13 years. So we've actually got people to talk to. We launched Maha Go, which is a at-home delivery service. I've reached out to some of our industry people, as in our fruit and veg guys at Melba Fresh, who have predominantly are fruit and veg guys, but their back end of their business is logistics. And I realised that hot food, as in cook now, eat now, wasn't going to be the way. It's a stopgap, and I'm not interested in stopgaps. I'm interested in solutions. So we said, okay, well, if we're going to do it, what do we want to re-enter the market with? And it was finish at home, 3-quarter cooked meals. We built a pretty cost-efficient Shopify front end. We integrated it with a logistics partner on the back end, and it went bang, like unbelievably well. We plugged it into our database, and they devoured it and supported us. The most successful business I've ever been in. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
Just mind-boggling. The way that the public got behind us was crazy, and it made me realise that this is probably not just a product that's a stopgap, but this is something that people want. And if they want it from me, then they're probably going to want it from my fellow hospitality professionals. So how can I provide a service to them where they can get their product out to a huge network of people throughout Victoria, so they can survive? And it's. I mean, I'm not Mother Teresa. I mean, I've done more bad than good in my life, but I do care for the industry, and I mean, I believe that you need a strong league, like in the EPL or in the AFL or whatever you follow. If you don't have a strong league, it's a shit game to watch. So I need all the restaurants to be doing well for us to have an industry. So I thought, well, I'll be really transparent. We'll set up a platform. We called it Providoor. We've educated the other restaurants on how to prepare this new type of cuisine.
So what sort of restaurants are we talking about? Who's involved with Providoor?
Well, I mean, we're a premium restaurant platform, so we're not. People have, sort of teed us off against, the traditional delivery platforms like Uber and Deliveroo, but that's not what we do. We're not pitched at takeaway restaurants. These are premium restaurants with brand integrity who want to ensure that the user experience is maintained, and that's the core objective of the platform. So we're talking to brands like Supernormal and Cumulus, Estelle, Flower Drum, Movida.
Wow.
Who else have we got? Sunda, Maha. I mean, it goes on. We signed up. We've got David's from Paran coming on board. We've got Lucy Liu and Philippe Michel and Ginger Boy and Entrecôte. I mean, we've been overrun with requests to join. So
it sounds like a copy of the Good Food Guide.
Yeah, pretty much is. It's been great because being in Melbourne, obviously, this is my stomping ground, and I know these people, and I respect them, and I trust them, and I think that they trust me. That's why they're open to, I suppose, me being involved to help deliver their restaurant brands.
What's been some of the challenges involved? Because this sort of model is very different to just running an everyday restaurant. Could you compare the business models and what the challenges have been?
Oh, there's a bucket load of challenges. I mean, this isn't restaurants. I mean, if you think about what I'm doing now with my Providoor hat on, I mean, this isn't a hospitality role. This is a marketing and logistics business. So we're talking about how do we market the brand? How do we get exposure? How do we get more eyeballs? How do we target our message? How do we use pixels and cookies and Google targeted marketing and strategy? And I mean, it's massive. How do you do that and maintain and not blow out the costs? How do you raise capital to do it? I mean, I'm solely funding it. Then there's the logistics part. How do you get economies of scale with delivery density? How do you even understand what that means? How does this become a certified business model where it's trackable and refrigerated, and I mean, what's all the legalities around it? I mean, you're talking about a multi-seller platform that can have a huge amount of traffic come through it. How do How do you plug in merchant facilities in that? And how do you even find a platform that can do that? I mean, it's mind-boggling from, if you think about from a hospitality point of view, to then shift and start to think, okay, well, I'm no longer a hospo guy, I'm a tech guy now. How do I make this happen? And from a caveman like me who finds it hard to turn his phone on most mornings, it's been a challenge. But from a hospitality standpoint, it's a big shift, and that's why we kind of focus on restaurants with a brand, because, I mean, whether it's wrong or right, I look at these brands as aspirational brands, and you'd assume that these guys have some kind of a sophisticated business behind them, where they've got people and processes, and you're agile enough to be able to flex. So now's not a time to dig your head in the sand and think, okay, traditional business will come back and will be right again. It's bullshit. It's not going to just happen like that. It's a time to really assess. So some of the challenges have been, how do we say to restaurants, this isn't just a plug and play where you plug in your hot food into a takeaway container and we deliver it. You have to worry about packing runs and packaging, and will your food actually translate well in this medium, and how do you use the back end of Providoor to make sure you've got enough stock to fulfill the orders? And I mean, so there is a few things to get your head around. So it's not just about people applying to be a part of Providoor, and yeah, they've got a cool brand and we accept them. It's can they actually do the job? And then we consider taking them on board, because we don't want to pollute the population either. We want to make sure we've got a really strong network of people who are all mutually invested.
This business Providoor came about because of a pandemic, but is it a model that you've ever considered before, and is it something you think is going to continue beyond the pandemic when restaurants are open fully again?
And the first question, is it something I considered? No, it's not something I considered. I mean, I've got other businesses like at Biggie Smalls where we've done the traditional Uber plug in and sort of go, and that never worked, and I don't think it can work. But is it something that's going to stick around? 100%. I mean, the market's devouring it, and it's not. I mean, I've done a shitload of things in my career, and I think one of the is from a hospitality standpoint. When we go to a charity event and we put something up on the auction block, and it's chef come to your house to cook an event, those things go for tens of thousands of dollars. Now, customers have always wanted those in-home experiences, but they've been out of reach. They're so expensive. I know for us in our restaurant, people are always asking, oh, but can we get a small function at home? Then you cost it up and it's like 20 grand, and they're like, oh shit, can't do that. But what we've produced now is a really cheap and affordable, efficient way for people to have the restaurant brands that they know and love at home. So it's going to be around for a long time, because it's not actually expensive. Like, I had an event last week at home where I was just cooking lunch for my family, and I used Scotty's Pickett stuff at Estelle. Now, first of all, I can't cook like Scotty. I mean, he's a brilliant cook. But when I ordered all the food and I actually looked what was out on the table, I mean, there was a lot more value there from what the raw cost would have been if I had to go to the supermarket and buy it. Plus, he'd done all the bloody hard work. I mean, everything was cooked. I just had to cook the pork belly, warm up some sauces, assemble a couple of things, and within 40 minutes I was eating, as opposed to the days I would have had to spend making all those sauces and going to the supermarket and prepping that veg and slowly roasting the chicken and all of this crap that I just can't be bothered doing at home. Scotty done it for me, and it was delivered to my house, the next day.
How did you get started in the industry?
Well, when I got let out of jail, it was either that or back on the production line. So, no, Jack. No.
That was like, I'm up for that story.
How do I get... Yeah. No, look, I'm a sucker. I'm a hospitality lifer. I mean, I wanted to be in hospitality from the time I was about 13 or 14. I mean, I loved cooking, and I wasn't good at anything else. And it was either automotives. I mean, I was, I've got my uncles are big rockabilly superstars who build hot rods and all that kind of stuff. So it was either, playing double bass in a rockabilly band, building, H. Humanaros my whole life, or I loved cooking. So I kind of tried my hand at all of it, and cooking was the only thing that I kind of was okay at. And I fell in love with it, mate. I fell in love with the romance, the pressure, the rock and roll, the creativity, the camaraderie, the hierarchy, the whole lot. I just got sucked in, and I've been on that high ever since. And I think that our industry still possesses some tame version of that somewhere, but the world and the industry continues to change, and the purity, whether it's sustainable or not, but that passion and fire that was there is no longer burning as bright. But I'm still in love with the romance of it.
Can you tell us a little bit about your food and some of the history behind it? Because it's pretty colourful and vibrant and fragrant, incredible food. But there's always stories behind food, and particularly your food.
That's nice that you say that, mate. I mean, I've been trying to get some praise from you for a long time. So fuck, all I have to do is come on your show and I'll get some. That's awesome. I want to get a copy of this. This is great. Wow. Shit. I have to take a moment. Hang on. My food. I mean, I started cooking in the early '90s, and it was all about either British flavors or French, European. And I got really, I grew up in the era of Marco Pierre White being all there was, and the Roux brothers, and Ducasse and all these guys, and so I was very much into the classics, and I spent the first half of my career cooking that food, and loved it. But I quickly got to a point where I'd been cooking since I was 16, and I was now 27, and I felt burnt, and whether I'm blowing my own horn or not, but I kind of thought I'd achieved more than I ever would have achieved and probably should have achieved. And I was just engaged and thought, fuck, I don't know if I want this anymore. It's burning me out. I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm just about to get married, and my wife's not a hospo wife. So I'm thinking, maybe I'm still young enough. Maybe I can go back and do another trade. It was always going to be a trade for me. And I was only young, man. I was 27. I thought, I can do that again. I mean, I can do this. So we got engaged, and I was still contemplating. I resigned from my job. I was the exec chef at Chateau Yering out in the Yarra Valley. And my wife and I went on our honeymoon, and we went travelling around the Middle East. And I just went, this is what I love about food, and this is what speaks to me about I'm Maltese heritage, but our food descends from, and our culture descends from the Phoenicians, and there's a big sort of Middle Eastern heartbeat in the Maltese world. My wife's Lebanese as well, so spending a bit of time just reconnecting with family, I've gone, this is what I love, and I fell in love with food again, and I really started to explore what my, I suppose, culinary ancestry was, and started to connect with that, and decided that this was what I wanted to do moving forward. And I've just really tried to own that space. We don't do traditional Middle Eastern food. I mean, I think that there's a lot better traditional Middle Eastern chefs out there than me. I don't profess to know anything, but I do love it, and I do try to learn, and I'm constantly learning and trying to just create big flavors. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's not tasty, I'm not interested. I mean, subtlety is nice, but you always remember the outspoken person in the room that's making the most noise, and I think that's our food.
Well, you just sort of talked about big flavors. What are some of the dishes that make you really happy to cook and eat?
Something to cook. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, we change our menus so frequently that. It's ever evolving. I mean, at the moment, we've just reopened the doors at Maha. I mean, this is our third night, and I'm enjoying putting up those classic dishes that people love about us. Our slow roasted lamb shoulder and our kingfish that's cured in chamen. But it's I suppose it's the reinvention of those dishes. I mean, we don't serve it now the same way we did 10 years ago. Now we're seasoning it a little bit different. We've altered the sauce. We're garnishing it a little bit different. So I suppose it's seeing the evolution of those dishes, and our old customers reconnect with them is always awesome. But what am I enjoying eating? I mean, to be honest, I've gone on a bit of a health kick.
That's the opposite to everyone in the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, leading up into the pandemic, I'd lost like 13 kilos because I was just fat and lazy, and getting to that point of unhappiness again. because, we all go through ups and downs, and we like to blame everybody else for the position that we're in. But a lot of the time, things are in our control, which is that we're not honest or strong enough to admit it and take control of it. And I'd been in that position before where, you're overweight, depressed, probably drinking too much and everything else. And you just start to let that shit get out of control, and then it starts to eat you away. So I could see myself getting back into that spiral, and I went, nah, this is bullshit. I've got too much to lose now. I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got a public profile, I've got all of this crap. I need to get myself in order. So I got myself in order, and I'm still sort of on that now. So I've been eating, it's not even about food. I've been eating 2,000 calories a day. And it consists of poached chicken, vegetables, and rice most days. But I love food, and the thing is that I'm an all or nothing, and I can't have a glass of wine. I have a bottle of wine, and if I'm going to have dinner, I'm having fucking dinner. I'm not having like an entree and then I'm done. So I'm looking forward to my next night out.
Well, mate, I can definitely resonate with all of that. Oh, it's certainly the last bit about if I'm in for dinner, I want to eat everything. Well, let's talk about Maha. Earlier you were saying, like there's this thought that we're just going to jump back into the sort of normal restaurant sort of models and move forward, but you don't think that's the case. What's happening with your restaurant, and how do you see that next 6 months for that?
No, I don't think that's the case, because Maha's right in the guts of the CBD. All right, and now, even though tonight we're full and tomorrow we're full and the rest of the week we're full, which is so hopeful, and I love being in the restaurant and seeing people here. I love it, but we've got a way. It's like we're in an abusive relationship in hospitality. We're in this relationship where we're beaten down every day, and then the one day that we're not beaten down, we just reflect on how great our marriage is. It's not that great, just because today was good doesn't mean yesterday was good, and tomorrow's not going to be great either.
Yeah.
But it's I sit there and look. Okay, well, we're a traditional business that runs 7 days a week, lunch and dinner. Okay, and that's our normality. Now we're at a 5-day-a-week operation where we're just doing dinners Tuesday to Saturday. Now, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it's not normal. What normality was is being the hamster on the wheel, running around chasing our tail. But this way, there's an old saying. I think, what is it? It's revenue. Revenue's vanity, margin is sanity. And that's kind of the ethos I'm hoping the new world embraces, because there's no use turning over $8, $9, $10 million to make 10-13% and go insane and be risking your neck at every turn with compliance and everything else. I prefer to turn over 7 and make 20% and sleep at night. So I don't know if things will go back to the way they were. I don't necessarily want things to go back to the way they were. But, I also look around what's happening around me. I walked, it was eerie today. I stepped outside. Don't tell my personal trainer, but I needed a sugar fix, and I'm a sucker for a Kit Kat. So I walked out to 7-Eleven and bought a big fat Kit Kat, and I stood on the corner of Flinders Lane and Queen Street, and it was eerie, mate. Silence, nobody, and this was at 1:30. I'm sitting there going, you could shoot a shotgun down the street and no one would even fucking flinch. I'm like, this is so how can we expect just that people are just going to start populating the CBD again, and lunch is going to come back? This year is going to be scary. We do a shit ton of revenue from November to December for lunches, corporate functions, all that kind of. It's not going to be here this year. So how does restaurants survive? So how do you pay your staff what you need to pay them? How do you keep them employed? How does that happen? So once the government decide to stop propping us up with JobKeeper, which is essential, there is going to be a shit ton of pain. That's why opportunities like Providoor for me are so relevant, because it's not the solution, but it's definitely an opportunity to help people keep moving forward. I don't see anybody else sticking their head up with any other solutions. So I'm going to keep riding that horse until the legs fall off.
How are you feeling about your industry that it's been part of the majority of your life now, and the future of it?
I'm worried for it, and I'm excited. I mean, I'm worried because I'm nothing special, mate. I mean, I'm uneducated. I left school at a young age, and I'm just a dumb chef. Yeah, I mean, I'm nothing special, but I try new things, and I've surrounded myself with a network of people who are unbelievably talented and leaders in their field, who are not hospitality people. So I'm surrounded by positivity and new opportunity. But for those who aren't, who are traditional hospitality, bread and butter, mum and pop shops, how do you see? How do you find your way through this? Like, where is the light going to come from? How are they going to transform and turn themselves into something new? Um, I don't know, mate. I mean, I don't know. I'm concerned. Um, and without sounding, I mean, and it's the worst probably thing to say, because you're talking about people, and people forget that when they make just sort of brushstroke comments, that you're talking about, through that brushstroke, you're talking about people and lives and emotions and savings and sacrifice. But sometimes big changes like this do actually. This is. I mean, I'm conflicted by saying it, but I mean, it almost clears the dead weight. It almost culls things that were inhibiting growth. And it's like, I suppose, if you look at your garden and you've got overgrown trees that are just strangling the roses. You clean out the weeds, the roses grow, and the garden looks prettier. I mean, it's probably it's probably not the right way to put it, but if you look at the industry, there's a lot of things that are strangling it. I mean, we've got a shortage of customers, we've got a shortage of staff, we've got a shortage of revenue. So if there was less venues, if there was less uncompliance within the industry because of operators who are operating, fraudulently, things could probably be better. It would actually probably grow a bit harder. People would be in better jobs. People could actually have succession plans within those jobs. Employers could actually spend time training and employing people. So the positivity I see is that there may be some great opportunity in the stronger entities. But the sad thing is that some of the weaker ones may be the one that the people that fall on their sword.
I think you raised some really valid points, and it's issues that the hospitality sector has had ongoing, which skill shortages, too many restaurants, um, you know, consumers not paying enough money for what they're receiving, and maybe this is, as you sort of say, this is a time of change for all of that.
The reason why consumers don't pay enough for food. It's not because they don't want to. It's because you don't need any really accreditation or anything to become a restaurant owner. You go do your HACCP stuff and whatever else, and you're a good cook, you've got a passion, you've got some money, someone backing you, and you open a restaurant and you work your ass off and you do it. You work with a small team and no one really gets paid, and you can afford to sell your food cheap because the operating costs are low. So all that does is hold back the industry, because the big boys or the bigger operators who employ more people who are compliant can't charge what they need to charge because they're continually being undercut by the newbies. So it creates an unbalanced field where instead of the top tier competing with the top tier can increasingly getting pulled down by these new people coming up that aren't actually charging what they should be charging, because they can't compete on fit out, and they can't compete on marketing, and they can't compete on reach. So they compete on price. And the consumer will go, well, why would I go to Vue de Monde when I can go to Ides? And Ides is brilliant, and I love Pete, and I think they're doing a great job. But they don't charge what Vue de Monde charges, but they probably should. You know what I mean? So if there needs to be more balance in the marketplace where people are charging, where restaurateurs are charging a fair and reasonable price for their product that's actually sustainable, where the industry can survive. Because if we're continually undercutting each other, I mean, it's just gonna well, we've seen what happens. I mean, restaurants close, staff don't get paid, and then the restaurateur is the one holding the bag.
A little earlier, you said you're actually quite excited about the opportunities that the future may hold. What do you think are the opportunities moving forward?
I think the opportunities are that we can reclaim a little bit of that. we can reclaim a bit of that professionalism and hope and growth within the industry that we saw, sustainable growth. I mean, that we saw sort of, in the early thousands, the late 90s, where you actually did like an apprenticeship, like a real apprenticeship, because you were working, I did my apprenticeship in hotels, like you do it in a hotel, you had structure, you had people around you training you, and you came out the other side better. Like I remember at one stage, we were working at the Sofitel. There was me and George and Scotty Pickett and Gabriel Martin and Shannon Bennett and Gary Megan, and we were all in that same restaurant. You know what I mean? So you're thinking about I'm not blowing wind up my ass, but you think about the other names, the talent that came out of that place, and it wasn't just a fluke. It's because there was really good training institutions that then set up the future for the industry. So I'm hopeful that we have an opportunity to start training people again. Now we're in this vortex of sucking in young, talented staff, whether it's front or back of house, getting them up to a level where they're semi-competent, and then promoting them straight up to the top, because we've just got no talent pool, and we can probably promote them a little bit cheaper, and we can run a little bit leaner, but they don't get a chance to fully develop. So what I'm hopeful for is that this gives us a chance to start training people again.
Well, mate, you've been pretty awesome. We could record a whole bloody series with you. You've got so much to say, and it's bloody fascinating. Congratulations with Providoor, and thanks for coming on the show, and keep in touch, and we'll talk soon.
Done deal.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.